So in this video, we'll cover what are GCMS notes, who can request them, how to request them, at what stage of your application should you request them, and what to expect after you request them. Let's go. So when an officer begins to process your application, they make notes about their findings from your application. For example, for a spousal sponsorship application, they could make notes about the officer's satisfaction with the proof of relationship documents that you've provided, or notes about the eligibility of the principal applicant, the eligibility of the sponsor, notes about each stage of your application such as biometrics, medical, pre-arrival, or notes about the completeness of your forms, or anything that the officer feels is important for them to keep a record of about your application. And all this information gets recorded in their system under your profile. And as your profile or application moves from one officer to the next or one stage to the next, these notes are assessed and updated at each level until you finally receive a decision delivered to you. So typically you would want to request these notes when your application has passed its normal processing time or seems to be stuck at a particular stage. Or let's say you received a rejection, but the reason for rejection was not highlighted in the letter or communication that you received from IRCC. Then you can request these notes to find out what actually happened. And by the way, these will only work when your application is in their system. So let's say when you submit the application, you wait, you let it reach the officer, let the officer conduct the R10 completeness check to make sure that the initial submission with all the documents and forms is complete. And once they verify that, they usually issue you an acknowledgement of receipt email or the AOR email, which is basically just to verify that the application has begun processing. So it is at this point that the application is in the system. So once you receive your AOR email, that's going to have your application number, which for family class applications usually starts with F. And this number is going to be required for requesting a GCMS note. So when you fill out the form, that number has to be entered. And we'll get to that in a second. So once you receive your AOR email with the application number, technically you can now raise a GCMS request. But again, it's not really going to make sense at such an early stage of your application. The next stages that follow, such as biometrics, medical, background, eligibility, pre-arrival, ECO, PR, can all take their own fair amount of time. And for a good application, the turnaround time is usually 6 to 7 months. And obviously, this could be less and this could be more depending on the complexity of the application, the visa office that the application goes to, the program analyst assigned to your case, and the backlogs of overall applications that IRCC is experiencing at the time. So usually you can expect a normal processing time from start to finish to be around 12 months. I know it says about 22-23 months on the IRCC website, but that number is not really correct. It's based on the historical data. The current numbers are much better. So when to actually request these notes? Let's say you submitted your application last October 2021. You got through all the stages just fine within the normal processing time. So your AOR, biometrics, medical is all done within the normal processing time. But for some reason, your application seems to be stuck at the background stage. And your PR tracker tells you that the application hasn't cleared the background stage for, let's say, 5 months or 6 months. That should be a good starting point to think about GCMS request. You can do the same thing if your application seems to be stuck at any stage for a very long period of time, right? So in order to request these notes, you either have to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident or someone living inside of Canada. So for example, for spousal sponsorships, an outland one where the applicant is outside of Canada, that applicant cannot request these notes for themselves. So obviously, in this case, your sponsor, who may be a PR or citizen, is the best person to request these notes for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be your sponsor. Even if you've worked with a representative, a paid one, they can request this for you. Your lawyer can request these notes for you as long as they have a valid status in Canada, right? So you'll get to this page. This is the access to information and privacy online request. I'm going to link it in the description below. This is where you request for your GCMS notes. And for demonstration purpose in this video, we'll assume that this is a spousal sponsorship application. The principal applicant is outside of Canada. So the sponsor is requesting the information on behalf of the principal applicant. All right. So if I scroll down, you're going to click on next here on this page. Then simply agree to these terms and click continue. And this is where you select the department. So for department, you will select Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. agree to the terms and conditions again. And here it gives you two categories under which you can make the request. So this Access to Information Act is going to apply to most of the applicants. So in order to be able to do this, you either have to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident of Canada or any individual who's living inside of Canada. Then foreign nationals outside of Canada are also eligible to make a request under the Privacy Act. So let's stick with the Access to Information Act in this case. I'm the sponsor requesting information on behalf of my wife, who's the applicant, who's in India. That's the case we'll assume, alright. So it asks, please select the category that best describes you, you meaning the person who's requesting the information. So I am requesting the information and I am a permanent resident of Canada. So that's what I'm going to select. And this is where I'm going to enter all my details, the requester's details. So my last name, my first name, my complete address, my city, province, country, zip code, telephone number, email address. And then are you requesting information on your behalf? So no, I'm requesting the information on my wife's behalf. So I'm just going to select no. Are you requesting information concerning a deceased individual? So no. Select the category that best describes you, the requester. So I am just a member of the public. That's what you're going to select. How would you prefer to receive? Simply select email, right? Then hit continue. Then it just gives you information about the Privacy Act and the Access to Information Act. So I'm just going to select the Access to Information Act. Which type of records do you wish? So we wish to get the immigration or citizenship records, right? Then this is where you enter all details about the person who you are requesting information for. So I'm going to enter details about my wife because she's the one I'm requesting information for. So all details here exactly as they appear in her application. Then for UCI, you can look up the biometrics or medical requests and enter the UCI. If you don't have the UCI, you can simply leave it blank. What type of record would you like to request? So because this is a family class sponsorship application, that's the one that I'm going to select. Specify the type of file you're requesting. So you should select the immigration file because that's the one that corresponds to the applicant. That's the one where you'll get the most information. So select that. Which specific information are you looking for? So this is the one you should select, status update of file, because you want to know where your file is stuck, right? You can also request this one, the application supporting documents and correspondences. If you want to know what documents you have sent to IRCC and all the communication that you and IRCC have done back and forth. So that would be a choice in that case. But for majority of the cases, you want to know your status, right? You want to know where your file is stuck. So that's the one you'll select, status update. File number. So obviously, once you receive your acknowledgement of receipt, you will have a file number that starts with F followed by like 9 digits. So you'll put that file number here. And this field is mandatory. So if you don't put the file number, you won't be able to allow to proceed to the next stage. All right. So now you can hit continue. All right. So next up is the consent section. So because I am requesting information on my wife's behalf, she has to give me consent to be able to do this. So you have to upload a form here, a consent form, if you're giving access to someone to request GCMS notes on your behalf. All right. So what you have to do is you have to fill this form 5744. And this is where you can find that form. I'm going to link this page in the description below so you can directly navigate to this page and download that form. So this is the consent form 5744 and information about the requester, meaning me in this case, and the person who you are requesting information for, meaning the applicant in this case, has to be populated here. So number one is the designated representative's information. So in this case, because I am requesting information on behalf of my wife, I become the designated representative. It doesn't necessarily have to be the sponsor like we talked about. Anybody who's in Canada who has a permanent resident or a citizen status or has an active status in Canada can request information on behalf of the applicant who's outside of Canada. So whoever is requesting information becomes the designated representative. Don't confuse this representative with the representative who might have submitted the application for the principal applicant. For example, when I did my wife's spousal sponsorship application, I submitted the application on her behalf and I submitted the form 5476 because I acted as her representative. That is a different kind of representation. This representative simply means anyone who is requesting information on behalf of the principal applicant. So there's a difference between these two kinds of representatives. And obviously it only makes sense that the sponsor who's sponsoring their spouse act as a representative here also, because they have status in Canada, whereas the principal applicant who's outside of Canada doesn't have a status. All right. So let's say you hired a representative to submit the application for permanent residence for you. You can use the same representative to request GCMS notes for you also. All right. So my last name, my first name, address, city, province, country, postal code, telephone number, and email address. Alright, this is my current residential address in Canada. Then this is where all the information about the principal applicant who you are requesting information for is going to be populated. So my wife's last name, her first name, her date of birth, and the date that she will sign this form, or the date that you will submit this request. So once you're done with this form, the principal applicant is going to print this form out and sign here, and it says in blue ink. So you can't do electronic signatures, you have to sign with blue pen, right? So remember, the sponsor or the person who is requesting information, meaning the designated representative, doesn't really have to sign anywhere. Only the person who you're requesting information for, or the principal applicant, has to sign this section in blue ink, alright? So you'll finish this form, you'll simply print it out, and you will sign with blue ink, and then you can either use a scanner to scan it back, or you can simply take a picture from your smartphone as long as the information is clearly visible. So once my wife completes this form and signs it, she's going to send it to me, and then I'm going to upload this in this section. Once the form is uploaded, I will also upload a proof of status for the person who's requesting information, just to prove that I indeed have a valid status in Canada. So because I am a permanent resident of Canada, I am simply going to upload a digital copy of my PR card as proof of my valid status in Canada. And then once you're done with the upload, you can simply click on continue, and then you get to this page. This is where you verify all your information is correct, all your uploads are done, and then you certify. Then it's going to take you to a payment portal page where you make your $5 payment, and then you're pretty much done. You may receive a confirmation in your email that your request has been submitted successfully, and that's it. So once you send your request, it can take about a month for someone to get back to you. Obviously, in a lot of cases, it may take longer. So you'll just have to be patient with this one and manage your expectations accordingly. But the response time is usually better than WEBFORMS. And I'd like to point out something. Raising a GCMS request does not really trigger any action from IRCC. So let's say your application was stuck at a particular stage. You raising the GCMS note request is not going to speed the process along. Okay? And it could just happen that sometimes when you raise a GCMS request, you receive an update in your application around the same time, and that may lead a lot of people to believe that it was because of the GCMS request that their application got sped up. But that's not the case. And finally, when you do receive your GCMS notes, don't expect to learn a lot about your application. You will get some idea about what status your application is in and what are the stages that have been cleared, or any concerns that the officer might have raised which you may not have found out. For example, let's say your application is stuck in background check. Now, it can just say that the application is stuck in background check, and even your GCMS notes might not tell you why it's stuck or where it's stuck. Alright, so manage your expectations accordingly. You will learn some things about your file and where it's stuck, what are the stages that are complete, and what to expect from your application down the line. But don't get your hopes up. You may still not find out everything about the application because some things are just kept confidential. Alright, so we saw that you can request GCMS notes to get details about your application. But what if you have to inform IRCC about some important updates to your application, or you have to respond to some additional document requests from IRCC? You can use WEBFORMS for that. So I discuss all that in this video that should be showing up on the cards here, and it's linked in the description below. I'll catch you there. Bye-bye.